Welcome back to Inner Peace Better Health. I'm your host Shreya. Today we are diving into something many struggle with, finding their voice. Joining us is Cara Tuttle Bell, speaker, author of Drowning in Timidity, Politeness, and Power of Assertive Living. With nearly 20 years of experience in higher education and women's empowerment, Tara helped us understand why assertiveness isn't just a skill, it's a daily practice, a pathway to healthier relationships and a foundation for inner peace. Welcome, Kara. I'm honored to have you on my show.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And let's start that. Why do you think so many people, especially women, struggle with assertiveness in everyday's life?
I think we've really been taught from a very young age to be pleasant, to be sociable, sometimes to be quiet. Um, and there are lingering ideas about who's supposed to be a leader, who's supposed to talk in society, to be in charge. And we're still working through that, right? So we've gained rights worldwide in many, many ways.
Yeah.
It varies widely. They're sometimes contested. I don't want to oversell it because I think there's a lot of work left to do. But there's been this push and pull for women to be more or less involved. And then it's sometimes hard to come in and out of the way we've been socialized to engage. And I mean, we can talk about whatever we want to talk about today because I think this applies to personal relationships, to family relationships, to the workplace. And sometimes it's easier to be assertive in parts of our day than others. And women come in and out of that comfort, but there are sometimes we still do feel really silenced or unheard. And so that's where this can be useful in some settings.
Yes, yes. And so many women can navigate this to their life also. And do you see this rooted more in culture, conditioning, or personal self doubt?
I think it's a combination of both, right? But I think that it's cultural conditioning, right? I think we have, this is the work I do at school, but sometimes people think this is kind of provocative to say, but if you look around, we have societies that have been led or dominated by men, and they're making decisions that have tried to preserve their hold on power and influence in society. And there have been concessions here and there, sometimes due to economic considerations, right? So if we need more women working because we need to support the families or we need to address a need in an industry, then there's been like, okay, the permission this far, but don't overstep. So mostly I find it to be cultural conditioning because we see this at work, we see this in the family, we see this in religion, right, where there is predominantly still male control of those spaces and decision making, at the top. Because we see plenty of examples of societies that aren't like that or weren't like that historically. You see examples of different family dynamics. I work on a college campus, so I see young women students who have spent the bulk of their schooling in women's schools and they come in very confident and assertive, right? So there is this the gender does matter, and the way we're taught to be women in our cultures absolutely shapes the way we interact and communicate, whether that's more or less assertively.
Yes, yes, that's so true. And the way you said that the girls' school and the co-education school. So I also come from a girls' school. So when I was in the girls' school, we were doing everything. Like there was no thing that okay, girls can do this, boys can do this. You are a girl, so you can do this. There was nothing like that. But when I went to a college that was co-education, there was I used to get comments like, "Oh, you are doing this, but this is a boys' task. No, girls usually don't do that." So it's so
And we're like, what?
relatable. Yes. So it's very much relatable the way you said. And you talk about politeness becoming a barrier. When does politeness cross the line into self-silencing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mean, I'm currently living in the US in what is considered the American South. And this culture, there are many things I like about it. So if I have any listeners from there, I'm not like, there are many, I choose to live here. I like to live here. But I've really kept encountering women, and like it'd be women my mother's age, so an older generation, who prioritize politeness above all else. You know, like do not disturb the peace. Everyone should pretend to get along. And there was a time for conflict, but I never saw that time come. I was like, well, when do we have the discussion? And it's always like, no, 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 no. You know, like um, don't rock the boat, so to speak. And so that's what had me thinking about it. Now, politeness is professional. Politeness can be kindness to fellow humans. I'm not saying that there isn't a time for that, or that we shouldn't be kind, compassionate, thoughtful, you know, with each other. I want us to be, but I don't want us to prioritize politeness above all else, because it can mean for the individual that our needs are not getting met. And it can mean for women as a group that our rights are being trampled on, right? That we're encountering barriers in society that we're never doing what we can to confront. Now, I do think other people are trying to maintain those barriers, right?
Mm.
But any type of activism, any type of change is really going to require us to move out of that passivity or politeness into engagement. And there are ways to do that kindly. You know, in my job, and when I talk to younger women who work where I work, I'm like, you were hired to do a job. They hired me because I, you know, am and have become an expert in this. So my voice at the table is why I'm here. It's not me being bold or feisty, you know, or aggressive even. Although when a woman engages the same way a man does, we often do call that aggressive. But
Yeah.
when you break it down, and there's so many studies on this actually, like they provide the examples where it's like you go in and you say the exact same thing.
Mm.
The actors have prepared to match tone, so you're using it in the same tone. But the woman who interrupts, or the woman who won't let go of something she feels passionate about in the workplace, is seen as more problematic and aggressive. Where in the same behavior, when we're looking at a man, we think, oh, he's a strong leader. He's passionate, he's engaged, he cares. And I'm like, well, I care. You know, I mean, this is only coming from from care and
Yeah.
dedication, because this is not fun to feel like you're pushing and in a space where that's unwanted. I mean, that's not really fun. It can be. Once you start getting the wins and you feel how good assertiveness, the rewards of assertiveness feel, then it can be. But I know at first that feels really fraught,
Mm.
but politeness can be passivity, and that's not really what we're asked to do. And I want not only our needs to be met, I want our wants to be met. You know, I want women's like needs and wants and safety and well-being to be prioritized in a variety of spaces. And sadly, most people are looking out for themselves a lot of the time. And so they're not going to do that creation of space and listening for us if we don't show up and engage where we can, where it's safe to do so. There are some really severe circumstances where, you know, silence, politeness, passivity are a safety strategy for you to get through the moment or out of there. That's a whole different conversation. So I want to be clear that, like, absolutely use it strategically when you need to. But if we're talking about a meeting with my romantic partner, or not a meeting, a conversation with my romantic partner, or a meeting at work, right? It's actually low stakes. You know, we've survived all of the uncomfortable meetings thus far, but what I'm going to do is start showing up for myself or my constituents, whoever they are, and engage fairly, clearly, hopefully efficiently, you know, and being really present. And it becomes a daily practice, not something we have to do for just the really big moments, because it's just not the best we can do. It's just, you know, like you're cramming the night before, it's like cramming the night before a test or something, and then you think you're going to go in and perform. Sometimes we can do that, but do you really have content knowledge? Like, can you do the follow up? What if there's an open ended question at the end of that exercise, right? I want us to be more prepared to engage so it doesn't feel like we're like scaling the mountain when we do have to be assertive.
Yes, yes. And the way you break down that fine line of being kind and being invisible, it's so much needed. So thank you for that. And also, Assertiveness is often misunderstood as aggression. So, how do you define assertiveness in a way that promotes both strength and compassion?
I love that question because this is really the space we're in. And this is where I think people get lost or they think, she's just advocating for pushy women. I mean, I don't mind pushy women because there's plenty of pushy men. Like, let's be clear and fair here. But that's not what this is about. So there sometimes people think of it as a spectrum, like a line from passivity to aggression. That's fine. There's another diagram called the assertiveness triangle that I like. And what I like about that is it acknowledges we're not going to be in the same space in every moment, right? And that we're sometimes going to be passive and sometimes going to be passive aggressive. Just never really works for us. We're sometimes going to be assertive. There are sometimes you might need to be aggressive. I try to be aggressive very sparingly, but I'm in the US, and the Western cultures in particular have gone through this like dog eat dog, claw your way to the top. Whatever you can get is yours is fair. It's not fair. We can do better. But that's still sometimes the mindset of the workplace or some of the meetings I go into. And so I'm like, okay, if we're being aggressive today, I guess I'm being aggressive today. But I was trained as a lawyer, so that comes a little bit easier for me than it does for some people, but it's still not the best that we can do. And sometimes sometimes I push back firmly so that I can bring us back into a space where we can engage assertively. That is, I'm here to assert myself. I'm going to be clear. So clear communication is your friend. I'm going to take turns. I'm going to articulate the wants and needs for me or my group that I'm representing. And I'm going to leave space for them to do the same. So it's kind of like I'm like doing boundaries here with my hands. So I'm like, I get to sit in this space at this chair, at this table, and take up an appropriate amount of time in a meeting, right? And
Yes.
so do they. And so do they. So aggression is when we start trampling the rights of others, where we go too far, where we're shutting them down, where we're bullying them. And that's a toxic space. And that could get you one win in one meeting, but it also then teaches people not to invite you back, to not put you on the committee, to not work with you because you're too difficult and too abrasive.
Yes. Yes. You just offer such a liberating reframe assertiveness as a form of self-respect and not as conflict. That's so amazing. And in your work, you have seen many women struggle to claim leadership roles due to timidity. What inner work needs to happen for them to step forward with confidence?
It does, you can start with inner work, and that's okay. I think sometimes young women, so I'm like 47, 47-year-old white woman in the United States. This is my position. And there's a lot of comfort and privilege in that. And I want to just acknowledge that because that's fair, right? So so if I get passionate in one meeting, I'm not likely to get fired. Because of the work I do, it's very sensitive. I work with victims of sexual assault and sexual harassment. And then the assertiveness conversations, the like women's empowerment and equity, I love. But my main job is dealing with sexual harassment prevention. So there's space there for me to be really emphatic or passionate or emotional about that a lot of people are not allowed in the workplace. Let's just acknowledge that, right? But
Yes.
they then think that I am motivated by that or that I just was born confident. I was not. I was not. I was very shy. I was very quiet. I was a very good student. And I thought if I just got good grades, that people would see the good work that I'm doing and I wouldn't need to be assertive. And it, I started really thinking about this and working on this from a place of personal development. When I was a young adult, when I was in law school, because that felt really hard for me. I loved the academic side of it, but the verbal maneuvering and engagement, the interrupting. I mean, lawyers are we always have something to say and we're kind of worse. We're bad at interrupting people because we like to argue with each other and jump in there, but that's not fun for others. So, you have to like dial it back. But I just felt ill-equipped to do that. So I started reading because that felt comfortable for me. That was an easy starting place for me. I'll get a book. And at the time, so this is 20 some years ago, the books I was reading, which I still recommend, there are moments in them that haven't aged well. I'm going to be honest, because we've like developed and evolved our thinking in some ways. But
Yes.
I read books, Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. It's kind of funny title, but there were lots of good tips in there. Okay.
Yeah.
I read Women Don't Ask, and this is a great women's negotiation book. I started with negotiation. I think a lot of people start with like, oh, I have to negotiate a salary or I have to negotiate something at work and I don't feel prepared for that. So all of the books on negotiation are a great place to start. But you can't just keep it in your head, right? So you have to leave the book at some point, right? So you've read the book, you've got the knowledge, you have to start doing the thing to practice. It's like any other skill. You can start really small. I always give people like, here's what you can do in the next 24 hours. I work on a beautiful college campus. There's lots of pathways. And so I think as a self-assessment, you can figure out, am I the person that always moves out of the way? Or am I the person that holds my ground as I'm like navigating the sidewalk? There are sometimes it's very polite. If anyone's in a wheelchair, I move out of the way. I mean, I'm not trying to like just force my way around town. But you'll recognize if you're the person always stepping, if you're the person sitting in the back, if you're the person on a plane who never gets an armrest, like then you are really starting from scratch because what you keep doing is reducing yourself or putting yourself next or last in a situation. There are times for that. There are wonderful people who, there are people we call servant leaders, right? And that's a beautiful thing if it's getting you where you want to go. But a lot of times it's not getting you where you want to go, ensuring your health and safety, your well-being, your personal, hopes and dreams for your life. And so you don't have to do it all the time. That's exhausting, but you have to be prepared that like, oh, here's a time where I have to lean into the conversation or sit up at the table and you want to be polite. There's a lot of times you can raise your hand. You don't have to jump in there. I mean, I'll tell you, I jump in. I'll be like, oh, or, and I just jump in. But there are times where there are meetings where people outrank me in the company, where I'm like, I don't interrupt them. I'm not jumping in there. Be like, that's a great point. That's a great point, John. I'm wondering if we've also thought about blah, 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 blah. So there are ways to soften it and be pleasant strategically when we need to, yet still be assertive.
Yes.
But boundary setting is the other side of this. I put a lot of worksheets, like they're self-reflection. So you start by reading or watching videos or podcasts. Then I think you do some worksheets, right? Where you can observe other people. You can create a list of role models. You can watch people speak publicly and be like, I found this persuasive about them. Here's where I lost. So you can do a lot of personal work. I do think a buddy is great. So if you have a friend who also wants to work on this with you, that gives you kind of an accountability partner, but then also someone to like boost your confidence and be like, yeah, we did it. In meetings, it's great to have a buddy. But then you have to start asking for things and dealing with getting some no's and learn that you survive. And we do. And you do. You just go on about your day. But I'm telling you, when you start winning, it feels really good. It feels
Yes.
really good. And also you can sleep at night because you did the best you could. You advocated for your people. You tried, right? So it's very satisfying in terms of your health and well-being. And then we're not staying up all night thinking about what I should have said, or days thinking of, oh, I should have said this, or I didn't do this, or I'm mad because they don't know how I feel or what I think. You've addressed it. If you're living assertively, you've addressed it. You've given them an opportunity to know and reflect, and you can do things in small pieces. So it doesn't feel like we have to really like jump out, throw ourselves into a situation and perform. It's really about changing the ways we engage a little bit every day.
That's so true. And you speak to the quiet battle that I think so many women fight behind closed doors and in their daily lives. Thank you for sharing so much and the book recommendations that you give. Those are, I think, wonderful. And so, if you have to tell something to my listener or just give a message, especially to women, what would you say?
I mean, I'd say just try it. I mean, it's your life cannot change without you taking ownership of creating that change. And that is easier said than done, I know, right? And please know you can start small because think about like if you do nothing, nothing will change. If you start small, but you do things over the course of the year, your life can be dramatically different. Your relationships with your friends, with your family. I mean, some family members are harder than others. I know. There are some cultural barriers, there's some really entrenched norms. I'm not saying these things will be easy, but it will never change if you don't try. And it's so easy for women to take care of other people. I love to take, like the people I love, I want to take care of them. But you have to take care of yourself. Who is prioritizing you? And you will be able to take better care for those people. So if that's still your motivator in life, this will help you take better care of those people. It's just win-win. I mean, it's women have less anxiety, less depression, less insomnia. They're usually more, they report higher rates of satisfaction at work, in romantic and sexual relationships. I mean, there's so many wins here once you start incorporating assertive communication as an intention in your daily life. I mean, it's really changed mine.
That's so true. And thank you for sharing all your knowledge. I think this conversation is so beautiful, and my listeners will also enjoy this. So, with that, I've come to the end. And my listeners, what a powerful conversation with Cara Tuttle Bell. If you have ever felt yourself shrinking back, today's message reminds us speaking up is an act of self care. Assertiveness isn't about confrontation, it's about living with integrity and inner alignment. Start small, stay consistent, and let your voice become your peace. Until next time, keep growing, keep speaking, and keep healing and listen to inner peace better health.